Pat, let's go into your kind of legislative preview here for 2024. We like to talk about what may or may not be happening out there, rest of country. So let's kick things off here with Missouri.
Well, that's the best state to kick it off with, because it's not. It doesn't seem like anything will have changed over the past 2 years, heading into this year, because Senator Denny Hoskins hasn't gone anywhere, and he has almost single-handedly killed sports betting the past 2 years, and he's lining up to do it again this year by all accounts. He really wants to include video lottery terminals, which are the slot machine-like things you find at gas stations across the country, and they are not legal there, and he wants to include that. There's some reasons behind that, that some are known, some are not so well known, and the professional sports teams and casinos and sportsbook operators all want it. They've got a bill that's been introduced the past 2 years and has been introduced again this year, that has a huge amount of support legislatively. But because of rules there, a single man can filibuster a bill away, and it doesn't seem like it's going to change this year. And it's Bill DeWitt III, the president of the St. Louis Cardinals, who they've got a ballot proposal initiative starting to circulate now. He said it the best, and when he reiterated the quote, that is, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over again and expecting something different. The same thing's going to happen this year, if I had to put any sort of money down on it.
Adam, let's play our favorite game here, geography, Matt, and let's talk about let's talk about bordering states of Missouri. We got Iowa. We got Illinois. If you go down to the bottom tiny little thing there, we have Tennessee as well with all of these. So we have a ton of different states in which there is legal sports betting that citizens of Missouri might be just driving across that border and sending the money to somewhere else.
Oh, I love when I get to talk about the old Casino Queen. The Casino Queen in East St. Louis, Illinois, which you can actually see the DraftKings Sportsbook in Illinois from Busch Stadium. It is across the river. You can walk across a bridge to be able to get your DraftKings account in Illinois from Missouri. So there are multiple ways that you can go about this if you are a Missourian and you're getting dennied right now.
Oh, I love it. I love it. All right, Pat, let's head to Minnesota.
So this is a little different. Minnesota has tried as well since 2018, really. And last year, they got as close as they've come. There was an unexpected twist where the Democrat Farmer Labor Party gained control of both chambers of the legislature, as opposed to what was expected to be a Republican majority in both. And they kind of took their issues and pushed forward a huge agenda, a giant package. That sports betting, unfortunately, was left behind because there are opponents on both sides, of course. It's a very bipartisan issue. And it's such a slight majority, they weren't able to get it over the hump on their own. They really want the tribes to have exclusivity. The tribes have killed sports betting legislation in the past in Minnesota, so their support is absolutely necessary. Meanwhile, the Republicans want the tracks included, and the tracks want a license. The tribes say that's a no-go. We kind of left last session with negotiations ongoing. There was 30% revenue from sports betting going to the tracks. That was on the table. I have yet to fully understand what happened in the offseason. But so far, we've got a new bill from the Republican Senator Jeremy Miller that would allow the tribes to partner with tracks and professional sports teams to offer in-person sports books. Does that have traction with the DFL? I haven't been able to get a hold of anybody on the DFL side yet, as of Friday when we're recording this. But the tracks themselves say, the Republicans and the DFL are still far apart in their situation. So while Minnesota might look like, and I feel like it still has the best chance of any state this year, there's still an uphill battle to go in Minnesota.
Adam, we talk a lot about some of these states that may or may not pop, and we go like, man, this is a state full of professional sports teams, and this and like Minnesota, like low key, like big time sports state. Like, I mean, like Minnesota fan, they don't have a ton of, they don't have like multiple teams in each sport. And so like some of these states that we've talked about, but man, Viking fans love their Vikings, and Twins fans love the Twins, and the Timberwolves obviously like have been up and down over the last few years, but still some basketball fans. Like, it's kind of a low key sports hub there in Minnesota.
Oh, I got geography, Matt, but I can't get hockey, Matt, from the same podcast. We can't talk about Kirill Kaprizov. Oh, Matt.
Or Marc-Andre Fleury.
You're letting me down.
Who is now second all time on
Look
whatever it is.
There he is.
Yeah,
there he is. Hockey Matt was hiding, but he came out to play. That's what I like to see. Yeah. Shout out to Minneapolis, by the way. Like, low-key, one of my favorite work travel cities that I've been to over the years, especially come summertime. It's actually a good restaurant city, like good place to be. When it comes to the sports betting side of things, what Pat is saying is really important to understand, that this is a lot closer than I thought this state would get when we were talking about states that have tribal exclusivity, right? Like, this is a state in which gaming tribes have exclusivity, and they're willing to play ball in a sense that even neighboring Wisconsin really hasn't done, right? They have a couple of sports books at some of their tribal casinos, but Wisconsin really hasn't done anything in terms of that. And we could talk ad nauseum about other states that have tribal gaming exclusivity. This is different when it comes to Minnesota. And I think really when it comes down to it, from what Pat said, this is going to be about the tracks. And this is going to be about the hold they have on certain legislators, and whether or not that you can still get enough votes to pass something if those legislators who are partial to the tracks do not ultimately come around.
Pat, let's just kind of hit the South here just in general. We know that Louisiana has your traditional sports betting that we know that we're getting in the majority of the states, but Mississippi yet to have mobile. We have Alabama, we have Georgia, we have South Carolina. You don't really see at this point now, when we look across the United States, where there's a big stretch of states that all don't have it, and what's going on, who's going to be the first one to make a move. So let's talk about all three of those as we kind of head into it with kind of our South overlook.
Yeah, I think, after coming away from Nickel G's, the big thing to remember in the South is they're largely Republican controlled, with some, solid Democratic minority voters or legislators that they're going to need to court for any sort of sports betting legislation to have a hope. And again, that's because it's such a bipartisan issue, with people on both sides who love it and people on both sides who hate it. And, the big thing to take away, again, going back up a little bit again, is, so many industry sources told me, this is an election year, a national election year, presidential election year, that can be very divisive at a state level. And that's something we've seen a lot of in Georgia. That the past 2 years, you've seen the Republican caucus just go with some sort of legislation that really upsets the Democrats. And so they all put in their heels and just say, no way, we're not going to help you with sports betting. Even though there's lots of people in Georgia who, on the Democratic side, who want sports betting. And, you're seeing that too in South Carolina. There's so much pushback from a certain segment of the right. And even though North Carolina is going live soon with online sports betting, and there's some hope that that's going to carry momentum over to South Carolina, I'm being told nothing's going to happen in South Carolina until Georgia passes. So, again, we'll see what happens there. Of note, in Georgia, there is a bill that is coming back from last session, so that there's some momentum starting to roll there again already this session. And in that is a tax, a stepped tax, where, base, single game wagers are at 10%, and higher profit parlay wagers are, and in-game bets are at 15%. And I think that was a fun takeaway from that bill, that, I don't know, maybe other states will see that and say, hey, that's a fun idea, let's do that. Alabama, same sort of thing. They don't even have a lottery. I've talked to several legislators down there who say the last 30 years of gaming is just a mess in Alabama. And so there's a huge hurdle there just to get anything done. And sports betting is a hope for some people down there. But maybe even just establishing a lottery is a first step down there. And Mississippi, there was a task force in the fall. They talked through all sorts of things about mobile sports betting. Of course, there's locally owned casinos who don't want it. They don't want to see FanDuel, DraftKings, and the like come in and dominate the industry. And they suggested a 51% revenue share situation like we see in Arkansas that's kept big operators out. But then there's big casino operators in Mississippi who are saying, let's do it. Let's do what we want to do and let's go. So Mississippi, once that bill drops, will be a fun one to watch. But yeah, the Southeast is going to be a really weird place to watch in the next couple of sessions, and maybe just in general, because it's a fun place to watch.
Yeah, Adam, it's one of those things like when we were talking about, as Louisiana as the bill was introduced, and then as Louisiana was getting passed, and then as the ramp up for Louisiana getting kicked off, we were saying this has got to force Mississippi's hand, and they don't care. And so with all of that, it makes you look at these other states, right, and say, I mean, everyone else has it. They've got to do it, but that's just not necessarily the case. We thought for sure. I mean, this is like, okay, you are now going to lose all of those people from New Orleans, all of those people that were like driving over to Mississippi, like that is gone. You're going to have to do it to where you make it easier for the people in the rest of your state to bet on sports. Nah, it's been a couple of years now. Nah, they hadn't done anything. And so to think that like, it's just this, well, everyone else is doing it, so they're going to do it, is really actually not how it works down there.
I think there are a few key takeaways, including what you're talking about there, Matt. The first of one is that from what Pat was saying earlier about Georgia, it is vital to keep in mind that if you are, let me check the timestamp, roughly 30 minutes into a podcast about legal sports betting, you probably care a lot more about this issue than the average legislator does. And it is not a needle mover. It is not one that, unless you're Governor Andy Beshear in Kentucky, that you're really like putting out a bunch of press releases about if it passes, right? It's just not something that people get passionate about, and it can get swallowed up in any number of issues, especially, as Pat mentioned, in an election year. Now, Matt, to the point you're talking about of surrounding states when it comes to legal sports betting in the South, Pat laid out a very interesting case in which you have kind of a witch's brew where a lot of states that have taken the lead on passing legal sports betting actually have been Republican-controlled legislatures and Republican governors, but you have such a religious conservatism that takes prevalence in those legislatures down there that you mix that with what has been the traditional Democratic opposition to worrying about preying on people who are of lower socioeconomic status, that it becomes a different horse trade to try to get the votes done in those situations. Now, you tell me if I'm crazy here, Matt, because this is something that jumped out at me, especially about Mississippi. And you know college football in the South a lot better than I do. But Ole Miss is pretty damn good now. And it's been a little while since Ole Miss was pretty damn good. And we know that in the South, college football rules everything, especially when it comes to betting. We saw it in Louisiana as well with LSU. Do we think that the success of a college football program might increase the viability of legal sports betting legislation within a state?
I mean, it is not out of the realm of possibility at all. And if some legislator could somehow figure out a way to get Lane Kiffin to reference it somehow and just be like, whatever, on in some passing interview and just kind of be like, yeah, I don't know why the people across the border can whatever. That would make seriously, that would make some people want to act like that's all it takes. Like, is they just need someone that they like in the door to like say something. They're like, I'm behind it. Like, there we go. I'm in.
I've got it. I think the big sports books need to hire Nick Saban as an official consultant who goes down to the legislatures and talks about the need for this in a regulated market.
I mean, if Nick Saban had done that, and if Nick Saban does that in Alabama, we will have the bill passed tomorrow. It will be like if Nick Saban just stood up there and gave a 5-minute Nick Saban the way that he talks and his cadence, and he said this needs to be done tomorrow. It's just like Jesus said it. I mean, like, that's basically coming from Jesus's mouth. at that point. But yeah, no, I mean, it really is though. I mean, that could be, I mean, look, Ole Miss is set up for a while, and there's going to be a lot of people more interested in sports now than were even just a few years ago because, our team's good again, and like, hey, let's get behind all of this. And as you get more interested in sports, obviously sports betting is going to be something that your friends are doing in other states, your bordering state in Louisiana is doing, and you're kind of like, hey, what the hell? Why are we not be able to do it?
Yeah, I don't think there's any question, and I think Pat will continue to have some very, very interesting hearings that bring some very interesting quotes to us about sports betting over the course of 2024.
Yes. Well, when you get back from North America, South America, Asian, Pan American, Nickel G's conference, we'll have you back on to be sure and tell us about everything that's going on out there. Guys, everything we do, absolutely free. So we do appreciate your support. If you hit that subscribe button every single time we do one of these, it'll just magically appear on your podcasting listening device, whatever it is, whatever your choice is. So we do appreciate that. So we are on Apple, Spotify, Google. So go in, hit that subscribe button. It'll be in there. And of course, Adam and team, including Pat, all the awesome words over at LegalSportsReport.com. Appreciate the support over there as well. For Pat, for Adam, I'm Matt. Talk to you guys next week.